Hello everyone. Even today, people praise the seemingly glamorous clothing of European aristocrats from the last century, while criticizing the seemingly rustic clothing of the East from the same era. But do you really think these clothes back then were just for aesthetics? This video will your perception. The long gloves that European aristocratic women never went without, regardless of winter, cold, or summer heat, weren't due to some bizarre rule against showing hands. What lay hidden beneath those long gloves weren't slender, elegant hands, but sores and swelling from syphilitic perineca, meant to be covered up. And these wheel ruffs and huge lace ruffs from the last century in Europe, which only aristocrats were deemed worthy of owning, they were actually specially invented to cover up the nobles' swollen and disgusting lymph nodes. And these long boots that Europeans loved so dearly, were they for beauty or convenience? In reality, they were worn because damage from syphilitic periostitis of the tibia caused severe leg deformities. The long boots were meant to hide these leg deformities, and the wigs that were all the rage worldwide, crazily pursued and called fashionable. In truth, they were merely used by European aristocrats to cover the patchy baldness and ulcers left by syphilis with exaggerated wigs. Also, the heavy white makeup worn by European aristocrats at the time was actually used to cover facial ulcers caused by syphilis. And why did European aristocrats like to place beauty marks on their faces? Of course, also to cover syphilitic ulcers. Many might not believe this analysis. Everyone can look at this picture. It's a skull rotted by syphilis. In the 19th century, syphilis was extremely rampant in Europe, according to historical records. Many famous European historical figures were infected with syphilis. King Louis XIV of France, King Charles II of England, Beethoven, Mozart, Schubert, Schumann, Henry VIII, Hitler, Napoleon, Van Gogh, Shakespeare, and others. Infected celebrities would wear wigs to cover their ulcerated scalps and spray large amounts of floral perfume on their heads to mask the rotting stench caused by syphilis. Records state that Beethoven, due to scalp ulcers, had to spray large amounts of perfume daily to cover the smell, and wore a wig year-round to hide the ulcers and pus-filled sores all over his head. Furthermore, historians point out that the of some famous European historical figures weren't as superficial as we learned in school. For example, Van Gogh cutting off his ear and Hitler's killing of innocents might both be related to syphilis symptoms. The history of syphilis rampancy among 19th century European aristocracy. Content might be relatively disgusting. Please watch rationally. The reason for syphilis infection is being infected by the Treponema pallidum virus, causing the body to be gradually eroded by the virus. Rotting phenomena appear on various parts of the body. By the end of the second stage, when the rot reaches the face, even the nose can rot off. European aristocrats thus developed these false noses, usually made of ivory. Wealthier aristocrats would use silver or gold to make them. By the late stages, these false noses even became a symbol of aristocratic status in Europe, because ordinary people, even if their noses rotted off, couldn't afford decorative false noses. Only aristocrats were worthy of owning them. After syphilis infection, not only does the nose rot, but the skin also erodes and rots, causing the facial skin to have numerous large and small pits. European doctors then researched a method to compensate, using dissolved beeswax and rosin to fill and cover the face, making it appear pit-free, finally applying heavy white powder. However, even this made the face look terrifying. The faces of those with syphilis were already eroded and rotten, so they felt no pain when sticking these gelatinous substances on their faces. Earlier, a writer named Jacques recorded this process in a book. In 16th century Europe, they initially used lime mixed with egg white, filling the entire face except the mouth and nose areas with lime. However, this had a major drawback. The lime on the face would quickly dry, expand, and crack on the face, looking even more horrifying. So nobles of that period would choose to have a maid accompany them at all times, constantly touching up their makeup. However, even if they used every possible method to cover the exterior, people with syphilis would emit a tremendous stench due to the corrosion. Thus, people of that era exhausted various ways to research perfume. Typically, an aristocratic woman would use up at least one 100 milliliters bottle of perfume a day. Otherwise, they simply couldn't cover up the stench emanating from within. When syphilis reached the third stage, the mouth and teeth would rot. Europeans even developed oral perfume. Not only that, after stage 3 syphilis rots the mouth, the cavity linking the mouth to the nose becomes very large. Coupled with the nose rotting off in stage 2, even when eating, food just put into the mouth would immediately fall out through the rotten nose. A European writer once recorded a scene dining with aristocrats. Over a dozen aristocrats sitting around an incredibly luxurious dining table, every delicious dish appealing to the taste buds. During the meal, an aristocrat merely lowered his head to drink some soup, but the soup that had just entered his mouth immediately flowed out from his nose, accompanied by a disgusting rotting smell dripping from his ivory nose. After reading this, does everyone still think the glamorous clothing of 19th century European aristocracy is worth pursuing?
So, what led to Europe's sordid history of syphilis? The following content is all based on real, documented evidence. Aristocrats wore long gloves to cover the paronychia and sores caused by syphilis. But there were always occasions where gloves weren't suitable, like while eating or writing. Then another invention was born, one that is still praised by many today: these silver false nail covers. Historical records show that an ancient Chinese female ruler also loved wearing these. There's a true story. In 1750, a French marquise named Crequy, infected with syphilis, reached stage 2 where her fingers ulcerated completely, all 10 fingernails rotting and falling off, occasionally oozing pus and blood with a foul stench. However, France had an unwritten rule at the time, Versailles Etiquette Code, Article 47. In any public setting, aristocratic women must not show bloodstains or any body parts, violators heavily punished. But some occasions simply didn't allow gloves. The already rotten fingers couldn't be covered by any method. In desperation, Marquise de Crequy once passed a silver shop and was inspired by the silver nails made there. She found a silversmith and had him custom make a set of silver nail covers that could encase half the length of her fingers. After this invention was unveiled before European aristocrats, it instantly attracted everyone's attention, because the number of aristocrats infected with syphilis was absurdly high at the time. Most had also experienced the stage of nail rot and loss, so these silver nail covers, over time, they evolved from initially crude forms into beautiful artistic crafts carved with various patterns. However, by the late second stage of syphilis, many severely infected aristocrats would, due to rot, lose the front halves of multiple fingers, ultimately choosing to amputate those finger halves. In this situation, they simply couldn't fit silver nail covers. So another invention appeared: custom-made silver fingertip caps. At the time, this invention was Alcippe. European aristocrats, they would even compete over whose finger caps were more noble and luxurious, and to cover the swollen and disgusting lymph nodes on the neck caused by syphilis, they invented these wheel ruffs and huge lace collars. To hide the legs deformed by syphilitic periostitis of the tibia, they wore high boots. And the most disgusting invention, the false nose. To cover the nose, eroded away during stage 2 syphilis, and perfume. I wonder if everyone has noticed a detail. Many European aristocratic women of the last century always carried a fan. Did you think it was for looks, or simply because the weather was hot. Actually, it was to cover the ulcerated sores on the face and also to block the intense foul odor emitted when opening the mouth, as syphilis had eroded the oral cavity. And these white wigs, I believe most people are somewhat familiar with them, because whether in many European portraits now or some film and TV dramas, they have become a symbol of European aristocratic status. In the late 15th century, Europe encountered its largest and most severe epidemic in history, the Cupid's disease, which is our modern syphilis. Victims infected with this virus would soon experience rashes, open ulcers, massive hair loss, and disgusting pus-filled sores. But since the medieval period, Europeans had regarded hair as a symbol of status. They associated hair with the image of Jesus. They believed long hair was a symbol of health. If you had no hair or imperfect hair, even if you were a European aristocrat, you would be ridiculed. Therefore, European aristocrats believed hair was extremely important for a person's reputation. However, due to the extremely decadent lifestyle of European aristocrats at that time, syphilis became almost commonplace within European aristocratic circles. Those infected with syphilis would soon present with such syphilitic, patchy baldness symptoms, as well as these scalp syphilitic ulcers and pus sores. In short, the final outcome was scalp ulceration. Thus, they invented these wigs to cover the ulcerated scalp. According to records, the earliest inventor of this wig was Louis XIV. He had craftsmen weave wigs from white horsehair. The wigs would also be stuffed with cotton and textiles, because the scalps of aristocrats with syphilis would constantly ooze pus and blood due to ulceration, and the stuffed cotton was used to absorb this blood. Typically, these wigs were not washed, because they were extremely expensive. Even aristocrats couldn't replace them frequently. They would just have servants replace the pus and blood-soaked cotton inside every few days. However, all these could be covered using external clothing but syphilis sufferers, due to viral erosion and rot, would produce an indescribable foul stench from their bodies, according to incomplete records. Stage 1 syphilis infection. Some body parts begin to rot, forming pus sores. The smell is like a rat corpse that has been dead in a sewer for 3 months in summer. Stage 2, rot and ulceration spread wider. The smell at this point is like a summer outhouse that has never been cleaned. Stage 3, rot has almost spread all over the body. Pus sores and wounds cover every part of the body, and each pus sore wound constantly oozes pus and blood. The smell at this time is like the stomach of an exploded whale on the shore, scorched by the summer sun for several days, emitting a foul stench. During that period, many doctors saw this business opportunity, so they had perfumes that could cover this stench. In the early 18th century, a merchant named Johann Maria Farina developed a unique perfume. The advertisement he made for his perfume was like this: "The perfume I developed has miraculous effects against the smell of rot and eroded dead flesh. It can cover all the foul odors you smell." This perfume waspy European aristocrats and became popular throughout the European aristocratic community. This is the most fundamental reason why this perfume brand has been passed down to this day. And this perfume is also familiar to everyone. It's the cologne commonly used by men today. Now, perhaps everyone knows why, when mentioning perfume, people first think of European products. But at that time, for many aristocrats infected with syphilis who reached stage 2 or even stage 3, just external, why applied perfume was completely insufficient to cover the rotting stench emanating from within their bodies. So they invented many other things, such as these highly fragrant scent chips, usually sewn into the inside of the aristocrats' clothes. And aristocrats of that period almost never bathed once a year. The wigs used to cover scalp pus sores often also became. At this time, European craftsmen developed another unique method. They would firmly fix the outside of the wig with a sticky liquid. and every few days, yet with large amounts of ambergris and musk. So, although we now see the aristocrats' wigs in film and TV as flawless and pure white, this is ultimately just film and TV, not reality. In reality, the wigs of aristocrats had already changed color due to prolonged wear. The better ones turned yellow. The worse ones turned a dark black color. They would also be small animals, such as lice and fleas, etc. Lifestyles and origins. So, after talking about so many bizarre and shocking inventions, did the European aristocrats of that time not know that contracting syphilis meant a painful death? Why did they compete over these devices used to cover rot after contracting syphilis? Personally, I certainly don't think they were unaware. European aristocrats had an innate sense of superiority. Even in extreme pain, they would maintain so-called gentlemanly demeanor, but they couldn't change their promiscuous nature. Ultimately, almost all aristocrats infected with syphilis died miserable deaths at a very young age. So, how did Europe's history of syphilis originate? Before discussing the history of syphilis, I need the lifestyle of European aristocrats during that period. Behind the image of European aristocrats actually hid disgusting hygiene truths. The corners of the Palace of Versailles were filled with the stench of excrement. Did you think these gorgeous, wide skirts were for beauty? No. These were invented by noble women specifically to be able to relieve themselves anywhere. They would usually hide a small wooden bucket or porcelain basin under the wide skirt. Most times, a servant would lift one side of the skirt to allow the mistress to quickly solve the problem. However, there were inevitably special circumstances. At those times, noble women would choose to simply stand or to solve the issue. Liquid would flow down their legs, soaking their shoes and socks. So even now, many stone floors in European castles still retain some yellowish-brown stains. And the European castles of that period were also designed very. These toilets, called garderobes, were directly over the moat or a cliff. Excrement would drop directly into the moat, solving the hygiene problem while adding to the castle's defensive. If enemies wanted to climb up from below, they had to get past the feces first. Even European aristocrats acted this way. Do you think commoners paid attention to hygiene? Of course not. Commoners were accustomed to emptying the contents of their chamber pots directly onto the streets from their windows. Drainage under European streets at the time was very poor, often with feces and urine converging into small streams. To facilitate walking on such roads, high heels were invented. Noble women walking the streets on high heels. It's hard to imagine that the original design intention of high heels was to avoid stepping in sewage. In 13th century Paris, many famous scholars used the term to describe the city streets, promiscuity and infection. So, do you know how promiscuous European aristocrats were? When I said earlier they didn't bathe, I meant the number of times an individual bathed alone could be counted on one hand. But that doesn't mean they didn't bathe together. According to records, 13th century Paris had 32 bathhouses. Nuremberg, Germany had 14. People, regardless of gender, bathed together, even chatting and eating completely naked. This phenomenon was extremely common until the mid-14th century, when the Black Death swept through Europe. Doctors believed bathing opened pores, allowing germs to invade the body. So, aristocrats closed all bathhouses and avoided bathing as much as possible. Historical records show Louis XIV firmly believed this theory, bathing only 3 times in his entire life. So, how promiscuous were European aristocrats? How wild did they play? Let's simply cite a few real historical examples. For instance, Spain's King Charles II. His father married the daughter of his own elder brother to give birth to him. French King Philip IV married the daughter of his own sister. And England's King Henry VIII, who died of syphilis, married his elder brother's wife. English royalist commander Henry Wilmot, Earl of Rochester, made advances to all the women in his own family, whether elders or children. He even held in the palace with King Charles II of England. His mistresses were too numerous to count. Many poems, let's not mention them here as they wouldn't pass. Even more shocking, he was also homosexual. Ultimately, he contracted syphilis, his whole body ulcerated, and he died miserably at 46. Of course, there were also European celebrities who died of syphilis. For example, there are records of Van Gogh repeatedly visiting a sex worker named Rachel, simultaneously with another impressionist artist, Paul Gauguin. The ear of Van Gogh cut off was also given to her. Many scholars speculate that the series of Van Gogh exhibited in his final period, schizophrenia, mania, etc., were influenced by stage 3 syphilis, as the virus had already eroded his central nervous system. And Beethoven's childhood understanding of him always portrayed him as an inspirational figure. I will seize fate by the throat. This phrase, childhood textbook descriptions of Beethoven. Beethoven never married, but after he became famous, Beethoven had endless money and female admirers. On one hand, he constantly visited brothels. On the other hand, he continuously had relationships with his admirers. Beethoven was always ready to accept any woman's admiration for him, wrote Beethoven's friend, Franz Gerhard Wegeler. He believed only physical pleasure constituted communication of souls. This lifestyle quickly led him to contract syphilis. In 1797, Beethoven exhibited deafness symptoms caused by syphilis, but at the time, he didn't suspect syphilis. After long-term treatment proved ineffective, Beethoven eventually completely lost his hearing and died tragically. Perhaps the most shocking was Mozart. He seemed fundamentally different from other famous people infected with syphilis. He wasn't afraid. Instead, he was extremely happy. He once wrote this in his diary. Syphilis. Francis I, a famous king of France, died of syphilis. Pure, simple, elegant syphilis. I have syphilis. I'm proud. And I have syphilis. I feel very proud. To hell with the bourgeoisie. Hallelujah. I have syphilis. There's also a letter Mozart wrote to his beloved, the content even more shocking. We won't state it here. Everyone can just look it up. Such a shocking, decadent life caused Mozart's end at age 35. And the famous Western philosopher Nietzsche was with some particular fetishes. He left this statement, "You are going to women. Do not forget the whip." In his later years, also due to syphilis infection causing neurological abnormalities, he published Origin of Syphilis. After reviewing the of European aristocrats, let me discuss the origin of syphilis. According to records, in 1493, Columbus's fleet returned triumphant with numerous rare treasures and loot from the Americas, but was a terrifying virus, syphilis. At that time, not only Europe, but the whole world was completely unfamiliar with this virus. Due to the promiscuity of European aristocrats, it quickly spread through royalty, the military, and ordinary people. Within just a few years, syphilis swept across Europe, even becoming an open secret disease within European aristocratic circles. Of course, they also researched numerous methods attempting to cure their syphilis, and these methods were even more shocking, one after another. Next time, I'll discuss the shocking methods European aristocrats of the last century researched to cure syphilis. Continuation. European aristocrats. Syphilis. Treatments. In the name of Mercury, arsenic, and God. As syphilis relentlessly shadowed European aristocracy, they engaged not only in concealing their festering bodies with opulent attire, but also in a frantic and desperate pursuit of self-redemption. These treatments were less a matter of medical progress and more a form of self-torture born from collective delusion. 1. Mercury treatments. Flowing poison, rotting gums, mercury baths and mercury salves became the most popular treatment plans. Aristocrats were required to soak in heated mercury baths to expel toxins through violent sweating. More direct methods involved slathering mercury-based ointments thickly onto ulcerated skin or directly fumigating the genitals. Toxic mercury vapors would rise from a specially designed funnel upon which the patients sat, allowing the potent poison to invade their already ravaged bodies. The cost. Mercury poisoning led to tooth loss, gums ulcerating into a peculiar blue-black hue, and permanent nerve damage, causing victims to drool and tremble uncontrollably. Ironically, syphilis patients were already prone to oral ulcers. Mercury treatments merely accelerated their journey towards becoming toothless wonders. 2. Arsenic and guaiacum, exotic holy wood and lethal balances. Guaiacum, a wood imported from the New World, was revered as holy wood. Aristocrats spent fortunes buying shavings to brew into tea, firmly believing it could purify the blood. More extreme physicians administered Fowler's solution, a preparation of arsenic, having patients consume minuscule daily doses in the name of fighting poison with poison. The cost. Guaiacum proved utterly ineffective, while arsenic subjected patients to the dual torment of chronic poisoning and syphilitic decay, leading them towards exhaustion. One doctor confessed in his diary, "They are either dying of syphilis or dying from my prescription." 3. Saintly relics and the virgin cure. Where science had yet to illuminate, superstition reigned supreme. Patients undertook pilgrimages to touch the bones of saints, or drank water from holy wells mixed with the ashes of the dead. France even popularized a virgin cure. Aristocrats sincerely believed that lying with a healthy virgin could transfer the virus, leading to countless maids and peasant girls being forced into becoming sacrificial lambs. The cost. Innumerable impoverished women contracted the disease in ignorance and died, while the aristocracy continued spreading the virus, buoyed by false hope. 4. Bloodletting, cautery irons, and heroic therapy. Bloodletting was seen as a panacea. Physicians greedily drained patients using lancets or leeches until they grew pale and fainted. For external ulcers and pus-filled sores, the red-hot cautery iron was the standard treatment, applied amidst the sizzle of burning flesh and agonizing pain, euphemistically termed searing away the devil's marks. The cost. Already debilitated patients often died directly from blood loss. Cauterized wounds frequently led to even more severe infections. A count lamented in his diary, "The treatment feels closer to hell than the disease itself." 5. Trepanation and the end of madness. When syphilis invaded the brain, causing insanity like Nietzsche's madness or Van Gogh's hallucinations, a terrifying procedure known as trepanation emerged. Surgeons would use specialized tools to drill holes into the patient's skull, claiming to release the intracranial demons. Documented case. Records indicate a German baron, after attacking his family during a fit, was forcibly subjected to trepanation. During the procedure, he struggled violently from the extreme pain and terror, ultimately dying from a shattered skull. Epilogue. The masquerade of death never ended. These bizarre and grotesque treatments pieced together a dark medical atlas of Europe from the Renaissance to the Victorian era. The aristocracy purchased poison with gold, packaged ignorance with faith, conducting a collective, unconscious ritual of slow suicide beneath the masks of their lavish balls. And the ultimate irony. Until the discovery of penicillin's precursor around 1910, the treatment that actually cured some patients was malaria therapy, deliberately infecting patients with malaria to induce high fevers, which accidentally suppressed the Treponema pallidum bacteria. Using one plague to fight another became the most tragic and absurd footnote of this entire era.